there are triggers that we have as human beings that cause people to want to hire us or to be with us. If I knew what it was, I could do it on purpose. I could bottle it or something. We don't know who we are. We don't know why we're here. And if we could have a glimpse of that, it empowers you to be brave, and it empowers you to try stuff and to explore more about it.
So what do you think prevents people from being themselves? All right, welcome to The Evolving Potential. This is episode number 13. Today I have on the show Timi Gleason. She has an extensive background in human resources as a corporate director, consultant, and a leadership coach. She has experience in organizational development and influence, working with Fortune 200 companies, corporate leaders, executives, entrepreneurs, and more to develop their leadership styles, their strategic thinking, team cohesion, and help people develop their unique contribution as well as their brand. She's certified in Conversational Intelligence, systems thinking, and stakeholder-centered coaching, which has allowed her to change cultures, grow leaders in private industry as well as the government. Timi believes that everyone has a purpose, a natural brand, and a distinct life path, and has ventured into various assessments such as StrengthsFinder, enneagram, and Fascinate, as well as aspects of numerology to help people discover more about themselves and thrive through her own framework named Soul Work Maps. Timi's team reached out to me and thought that this would be a good fit, and I have to admit that I was a little bit skeptical at first, but after doing my own research, I ended up being super impressed and intrigued by the aspects, and I'm excited to learn more from her. In my research, I wanted to mention this as well. I discovered that numerology has been used by super successful people at the top: JP Morgan, Richard Branson, Oprah, Rupert Murdoch, Coca-Cola Company, Yahoo, Jim Carrey, Ralph Lauren, and Sony. So I'm excited to see where she takes some of this work. And I wanted to get started by, letting her introduce herself.
Hi, Todd. Thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely. No, thank you for being here. So I want to start, I guess, towards the beginning of how you kind of got into human resources and some of your experience in that realm, and before you maybe moved on to some of this whole framework that you've built.
Right. I've had a long time to get to the point where I am now. Well, I was one of these kids that wanted to have a map for my life. I'm very focused and I'm strategic naturally. And when I was somewhere between 26 and 28, I was in a workshop, a personal development workshop. And I stood up and I said, where's the map? I want to know, am I doing it right? Where am I going? And they pretty much decimated me. They said, Timi, there's no map. And I was in tears, and I don't cry easily. So that was, it was a big deal for me to be that upset about it. So all my life, I pretty much figured there probably is a map, or there probably is some insights that we have. And it's taken me a while to see that I have it, and that I actually can share it with people. But the deal was that I wanted to know, I wanted to focus my energies. I wanted to know I was on the right track. I wanted to know that I was living the purpose that I believe that we all have. We all have purpose, no matter how lousy our lives are. We all have a purpose. So that was the kind of the beginning of it. And it wasn't until I was like 35 that I learned about numerology. And it was quite by accident. I was looking for something about astrology in a bookstore, and here was this thing on numerology. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. And what is it? I didn't know anything about it. And then I went to a tennis camp, and there was a numerology class going on at the clubhouse. And I was like, wow, I never heard of it before. And now here's a class about it. And then within a very short period of time, I went to talk to someone about some gym exercise thing. And she said, we were meeting each other, and she said, I have to tell you, I talked to this numerologist last night. And I thought, what in the world is going on with this? Why is it in my face so much? And I was raised Catholic, so I don't do numerology. I don't really do astrology, right? It's different. It's a different mindset. And so I just sort of looked up to heaven and I said, okay, I can take a hint. I'll start learning it, So I went and saw that lady that she'd seen. And what was interesting was the lady was beating the table, yelling at me that I didn't know who I was. And honestly, at the time, I didn't really appreciate that. But as I've, kind of held on to this and studied it for a couple decades now, I've started to realize that sometimes we don't know who we are. We don't know why we're here. And if we could have a glimpse of that, then how would the decisions we make be different? Yeah. So that was kind of how it got started. And now I'm well beyond that in terms of learning it. I've practiced it. I've tried it with friends, family. I'm now doing it with strangers. And it can be extremely helpful because at this point, and the way I'm talking about it, I can give you some key words and some thoughts, and you're going to go, yeah, I see that. That's what I do. You're right. And then it helps you kind of, helps you focus.
So how did you move beyond your initial skepticism with numerology? What were some of the key points in which you were like, oh my gosh, this is on point, or I see the value in this?
Probably because the lady was yelling at me. She was saying, you don't know who you are. You need to wake up. You need to have a bigger picture of life. And she gave me some really weird reading to do about UFOs and about things. But the good part of that, even though I didn't really I didn't go for that. The good part of it was it expanded my consciousness of what else might be going on in life. It opened my perceptions. And I think that's one of the things we struggle with as we're trying to develop our careers is, what are we missing or what is in front of us that we can't see? And I also have to tell you that when I was a kid, I was also like this. So when I was in kindergarten, Catholic school, nun and a lay teacher sitting around a table with a group of us talking to us about careers. And when I was a kid, it was the 1950s. So it was very limited in terms of what women can do. And anybody could do really. I mean, it's just a different era. And they went around and, either you were going to be a teacher, a nurse, a mom, or a banker or something like that. Not even sure if women were banking, but anyway, very simple stuff. And they got to me and, they were telling us stories about angels and about saints and all this stuff. So I said that what I wanted to be was an archangel. Mm. And what was unfortunate about that moment was they called me a blasphemer. I was 6 years old. They called me a blasphemer. And I knew what that was. And so what's unfortunate about it, from my point, and it really has a lot to do with how I coach, is they never asked me, why would you want to be an archangel? Archangels aren't human beings, but why? What's interesting about that? And that's would have helped me a lot. But what was interesting about it was that the archangels that I knew about bring hope and tidings and reassurance and that you're not alone. And I think maybe that's why I like being a coach, because there's people at the top, and I work with people at the very top that are alone. They're isolated because they have to be discreet, or they have to figure this out without telling everybody. They have to do things that are hard and a lot of times have never been done before. And if you've got a coach or you've got someone like a coach to talk to, it really makes a big difference. And I'm hoping we're going to talk a little bit more about who it makes a big difference to the most, because there's different types of people and different types of potential. But anyway, I was always this kind of kid that wanted to make a difference and to have a purpose and to not waste my time and to work on things that were the right things.
And so before you discovered this path, what sort of certainty did you have that what you're doing was right? Because like I said, you had a background in human resources. So you already had some of the more grounded groundedness to you of like strategic thinking, of
Well, yeah,
working and with,
let's go back a little bit before that,
yeah.
because when I was graduating from college, there were no jobs. Every night on television, there was these stories over and over again about these masters and PhDs that were working in coffee houses and burger places. It was constant. And I was just getting a bachelor's. So if those people didn't stand a chance, what chance did I stand? And I worked 2 jobs and went to school. So I worked on the weekends in a hospital at midnight to 8. And then during the week, I worked at the I actually ran the student employment office on campus because the regular career counselors didn't have a time. So I did that. And so I had a student job. And I noticed towards the end, when all this stuff was going on television, that there were a lot of students coming in that were looking for full-time jobs, and we didn't have those. We had part-time jobs. So I had the audacity to write to the state of California, and I had met the director of health and human resources or human services from the state because of the job I had. He had come to campus and done some recruiting. So I knew his name. I hadn't had any contact with him for a year and a half or 2 years, something like that. But I still knew him, and I had been to Sacramento and seen where they work and stuff. So I wrote to him and I said, there's all these really educated, talented people looking for full-time work, and the campuses don't have it. And what could we do through the employment department to, bring those on campus? And I laid out what my plan would be, and they hired me. So I, without ever really thinking about it and never having been in a job service, was hired into that and trained to go back out to campus. And in the 60 days that was happening, it was in the 70s, the middle 70s, the fall of Vietnam came. And because of that announcement, there were going to be Vietnamese, Cambodian, and Laotian students stuck in the United States that were being funded from there. They were going to be stuck and they weren't going to get to go home because of the war. So they said to me, well, you're going to go to campus eventually anyway. Go out there and help them, get them registered, because you're going to be the campus person anyway. So I go out there and I get everybody registered and I learn all these names. There was no fear on my part, because how would I know their names unless I just learned them? I didn't have any stuff about it. I learned all this stuff. And what happened was I never went to campus because campus postponed it for 4 years. And they did eventually do it, but it wasn't me that did my own idea eventually, because I had moved up, But I ended up being at age 25, the San Diego County, state of California, Southeast Asian refugee person. And I represented all of that and ran a program for all of the refugees that came through the system eventually, because of something that I had gotten out of college. So I didn't really choose it as much as I just created something for myself to do that I was, comfortable with. And then I started taking assessments, and they always said, oh, you'd be good at human resources, marketing, or sales. And I was like, the only thing I would do would be marketing, maybe. I wouldn't do human resources, and I wouldn't do sales. And I've done all of those things now. I mean, I in fact was hired in my first human resources job because I scored high on sales, and they needed a salesperson in their human resources group, because they were in the middle of a union movement, and they needed somebody to come in and try to get everybody to calm down, which I did.
Jeez.
Yeah. So it's sort of been fateful, or it's evolved, right? Potential and evolution.
Evolving potential,
It was me just expressing myself and, having enough confidence I do. You shared with me what your strength finders is.
Yeah,
My strength finders in my top 12, I have significance, self-assurance, and command. They're not high, but they're in my top 12. And so there's something about me that even if I might make a mistake or be made a fool of or whatever, I'll still do it. I'll still try.
that's awesome. Yeah, that's really awesome. Honestly, I like to have that confidence to be able to reach out to the state, but not only just to reach out to the state, but you created a whole plan.
Yeah.
Were you studying something in college that
Oh,
gave
they were
you?
charmed.
Yeah.
No. I'm a child development major. But I'll tell you that I'm sort of making fun of that. Even though that most people that are child development majors go into working in daycare centers, that wasn't the plan for me. I had a minor in adolescent psychology, and I was interested in it because of the classes. All of the classes were interesting to me. And I also had come from a different university and needed transfer credits, and I could transfer all my credits too. So I was
Mhm.
doing it from a practical standpoint. And I loved my classes because you learn observation skills, you learn how to say things very clearly. Like you can watch a child move from one point to the next and say that's a confident child or that's a anxious child, and that's not acceptable. What you have to say is the child walked 5 steps from point A to point B. You have to learn how to train your observation skills. And so that was really helpful. Those kinds of classes were really helpful. And then I also got a chance to take some classes that were outside of the box because of that. And I took world religions, which has really helped with all the things going on in the world. It's really given me a lot of tolerance, a lot of empathy, and I have knowledge of the Quran and, those kinds of things that
Yeah.
a lot of people don't have. So that was good. And then I also took a recreation class, and I didn't belong there. The woman she had too many people. She was trying to cull everybody, get people to drop out. She gave us really hard things to do in order to stay. Somehow I managed to
Jeez.
stay. The things she asked us to do, I went, if I was betting money, I wouldn't be able to do this, but I did them and I stayed. And being in a recreation class, you have to design programs. You have to think a certain way. It was really helpful. So, I felt like a lot of the classes I took were great.
Jeez. And so did you enjoy doing that job when you kind of got thrust into that? Was it something that you were really stoked about and you were happy to be doing, or was it something that was very challenging and you felt like maybe
Um,
wasn't something you wanted to do long term?
it was definitely something I did not want to do long term. I ended up doing it for, I want to say 6 years, taking a 2-year break and them calling me back to do some more stuff. And then I went into human resources. And how I got into human resources, again, was not designed. One of the people that ran the job service in a different city than San Diego, where I am, I knew her because I was in all these programs, and I was fairly high profile as just a regular state employee. And she is really a lot like me. And she was being courted by a newspaper in the city. She was in Escondido, and she was being courted to leave the state and come and be their human resources director during this union movement they were having. And she finally reached out to me and she said, every time they call me and every time they say what they want, I think they want you. So I want to know, if I recommend you, will you interview for it? And I was going to lose my job with the state. I had a very unique marketing job with the state at that point. And I worked for the district administrator, which she also worked for him too. So here I am, this regular employee working for her boss. And she did recommend me, and I interviewed for it. And it was very, very hard. It was way out of my box. And I went from, on a Wednesday night, being a state employee to Monday morning over a Thanksgiving weekend, being the director of human resources in a Fortune 200 company that was having a union movement.
Jeez.
Which is a lot. It was a lot in reality too. And I got sick right away. I had, had issues, but I was there almost 8 years. And,
Wow.
and it was that was an amazing, all of them were amazing experiences. Because I'm up for an adventure, and I also don't really want to have a boring life. I don't really want to just do mundane things. So, I usually attract trouble. I attract jobs, that are like nobody else can do these. I've had people say to me as I've gotten older, we need you. We don't really know anybody else. And if you can't do what we want you to do, at least we know you're going to try, and I always do. The last job I had, I haven't worked in a corporation since 2011, but the last job I had, at the point they hired me, said, we're going to assign you as a coach to these people. This one guy has been here since he's 17. He's now 52. We need him to let go of his empire and become more available to mentor other directors and vice presidents throughout the United States, but he won't do it. We don't know how you're going to get him to do it, but that's what we need. So we're giving it to you. And it took me a year and a half. And then one day I had an opportunity and I saw it and I did it. I converted him. So,
Yes.
yeah. And so that's kind of that sense of purpose that I have. And it didn't hurt to have my numerology information. You can't really know exactly what it means, but there's themes. And so if you can go with the themes, then it empowers you to be brave, and it empowers you to try stuff and to explore more about it. So we're going to talk more about that as we go on. But I think there's some basics that we should talk about.
Yeah, so we'll get there in 1 second. So I'm curious, at what point during all of this did you discover the numerology stuff?
It was right before I went to work at the newspaper. It happened right before I had taken. Okay, so this is another important thing. I see it on Quora a lot. I answer a lot of questions on Quora, and people need to take a break sometimes from work. And I had been working for the state for quite a while, and I did not see it as a career. They saw me as a career person, but I didn't see it as a career. And I had a chance, because of what was going on with their budgets and stuff, to cut my hours back. And I cut my hours back to 25 or 30 hours a week, and then freed myself up to do nothing, or to draw or whatever it was I wanted to do. And I was taking a break right before this other stuff happened, which now in retrospect was exactly what I needed to do. I needed to kind of let go of some stuff, catch my breath, be a little bit clearer about who I am before something happened. And that lady that had helped me with the numerology, I think I had seen her, and she had said, by the end of this year, you will not recognize yourself. Mm-hmm. And so I had allowed myself a chance to just sort of let go a little bit and work less hours. And it was only like for 6 months. It was a time capsule kind of a thing of, yes, you can cut your hours back for this long because it'll help us save money and everybody will be happy. It'll be fine. And so nice. I was doing that.
And so
I recognized myself at the end of the year.
Yes. What were some of the challenges you faced going into that Fortune 200 company, and or what are some of the continuing education stuff that you felt like you had to learn to really fulfill that role? He said it was
there was challenge. A really big problem with vocabulary, because when you're coming from the state and you have vocabulary and acronyms and things that about jobs and job service, and then you go into an industry and they have their acronyms. So my big goofy challenge was this newspaper industry has ROP, which is run of the paper. It's about how the paper is produced, and in the state there's ROP and it's related to jobs. It's a regional opportunity program or something like that, right? So I was constantly having to, learn stuff really fast. And they would call the area where the newspaper gets assembled and sent out the door the mail room. And in my mind, the mail room is where the mail is, and you pick up stuff and you drop stuff, packages off and all that. Yeah. So, I had a lot of that was a problem. And also, I'd never been a supervisor. I'd never been a manager. I'd never been in a human resources department. So I did go and get a certification real quick, and a bigger picture real quick. And I had natural leadership skills, maybe better than some of the people that had that job before. But also, you have to remember that during this, well, you wouldn't know this, but during this period, no women were really part of management teams yet. This was all new. And so this company was open to that. And the entry point for women in the 80s was through human resources or through customer service, something, not too aggressive. And this group was fairly, it was Fortune 200. So, Fortune 200 has a lot to lose if they do things wrong. They should be doing things right. And they weren't doing things right. They weren't communicating pensions. They weren't communicating a lot of the ERISA type things that became more important during that period of time. So I had to learn all of that. And it was and they had said to me when they hired me, they said, you are going to have a very steep learning curve. Are you ready? And I agreed to it. But I did get sick a lot. I had colds.
Yeah, super stressed out and working your butt off. Yeah. Sure.
And people would say, oh, your job, how is it? And I'd say, it's like having a large dog that's walking you. I was just coping for a while. It took about a year and a half.
Yeah.
But we did get through the union movement. I got in there 2 weeks before the union vote. And they said, you have to win these people over. And that means you have to interview everybody in that department and let them know you, and you get to know them. And so I had a lot of, meeting people and explaining, finding out what was wrong and telling them about me and relating and all that. And then the day before the vote, everybody went into a room, and the guy that ran the department that was in trouble and the CEO, the general manager of the paper, were in the front, and everybody's packed into this room. And then I'm just standing in the back observing. I'm new, right? And I'm just observing because it's not my fault this is happening. It's their fault. And so they're talking, and the group's yelling, talking at them and stuff. And then this guy, who later became one of, I was like his favorite, but this guy says, well, if you want us to vote, a certain way, then and he turns around and points to me all the way in the back, and the Red Sea parts, right? And I'm like this. So there was, a fair amount of pressure.
Jeez.
But we won like 3-14 or something, with 17 people voting, and it was only 3 people voted for it. And then what happened, which was interesting, was the workers' compensation scores went up 400%. So there was a reaction to the way the vote settled, and it wasn't even the same department. There was just a reaction in the company to the damage that had been done, and the workers' comp went up 400%. So whatever it was prior, it now went up 400 times more. And they're all coming to me going, what are you going to do about it? And, because of that woman turning me on to these other ways of looking at things, the traditional way that you lower workers' comp is to give financial incentives, or you do something to incentivize people either not to report it or not to get injured or something. But it just didn't. I was, learning it really fast, and was like, eh. So I went to my metaphysics and studied. I looked at what were the injuries that were happening. And the injuries that were happening were knees and feet and lower backs. And all of that has to do with moving forward. metaphysically. It has to do with
Wow.
moving forward. So I looked at what could I do from my position to help them be clearer about moving forward, that everything was okay and that we were going to be fine. And I developed the job descriptions. I developed the career ladders. I talked to people. There were some people that were blamed for the union movement. I made sure that I spent time with those people and reassured them that, I was talking to them and I wasn't waiting to fire them or anything. I clarified some things. They had said that the original meetings for the union had started at Carol's house. And when I investigated that, it wasn't Carol's house, it was Caro's restaurant. Caro, not Carro, and did those kinds of things.
That's crazy. That's crazy that you turned to metaphysics
I
and
did,
have the
and it
confidence.
worked.
And yeah, I was going to ask, did it work? Yeah.
It worked. It totally worked. Everything, it just stopped. It just stopped. And it stopped being a problem. I stopped being pressured, and it wasn't an issue anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
And so
it's weird,
you're
but
working.
it's impressive.
Yeah, so we can get into some of this numerology stuff because you were already working there with the knowledge of numerology, and
Yeah,
you're probably
I still didn't
you're
understand
continuing.
it. Yeah, I didn't understand it like I do now. It's really, to me, it's really valuable. It's hard. Like I'm having a month right now that isn't as exciting and isn't as dynamic as what I'm used to. And I've been kind of like, what's wrong? Maybe I'm this or maybe I'm that. And I just looked at what kind of month it is numerologically. And I was like, no, this is a month where I just like calm down, just study what's happening. Don't do anything. It's not going to be a high energy month. It's going to be a thoughtful month. And August looks good. So, I'm just, again, just resting or getting ready for something else. And I trust it. I have reason to trust it. And you know what? I don't know if it's right or not. All I know is that it gives me some structure and it helps and it's reassuring and it usually works.
I love that mindset. Yeah, it's like who knows if it's 100% valid, but it gives you that psychological safety,
Yeah.
that good feeling of
And it's only
certainty.
for a month. Almost everything is only for a certain period of time. Even the problems you have with kids are only for no more than 6 months. And if you can just sort of look at things like that, it helps you. And also to not only look at where you are, but what is the theme of where you're going and how could you prepare for that while you're having this downtime or this difficult time, whatever it is. So that's kind of the way I look at it. And that, that is related to the soul work maps too, because it was an accident and it was related to the pandemic that I saw the connections of how to put two business assessments together with numerology. And then it was a period of time and I realized that's literally a map. I mean, literally you can plan it out and see the pieces of it and it could be a map. And then I did my numerology for that year. And interestingly, because you don't always, just because you know numerology doesn't mean you remember stuff or you realize what's happening. So I kind of stopped and went, okay, well, this is a year. I could do this, but what's happening next year? I mean, this is a lot of work. Do I really want to put the money and time into this? And I looked, what's next year? And next year was my destiny number. And so like, well, if what's my destiny number, then yes, let's get ready this year because then I'll be ready for next year, that kind of thing. But I think what I want to be sure I say before we get off, because we can get on a tangent on this map stuff, but, I want to say that a lot of people don't have the basics about who they are and what they need. And if you kind of have a sense of what you need in order to nurture yourself and evolve, it really, really helps. So one of the things I learned when I worked for the state was all jobs at that time anyway, and I think it still exists now. It just isn't called the same thing. But they had at the State Employment Office the Dictionary of Occupational Titles. And at that time, this is all pre-tech, they have all the job titles you can have. And then each job title has a code. So everything clerical is in the 2s, and everything engineering's in some other, and everything manufacturing's in some other. And what they do is they're looking at people, data, things. And each job has different balances of people, data, things. Some jobs, very low people, high data, and moderate things. Some jobs, high things, like farming might be high things. And then data, not sure, and people, not so much. So, there's all these things. So I knew that I was high people, pretty high data. And that helped me as I would when people would offer me things, because I'd go, should be able to do that. And I had worked things. When I was younger, before college, I worked in the Fleet Post Office on a conveyor belt and doing mail. And that's a things job, right? And I was good at it. They gave me lots of assignments and stuff, but that wasn't what I was going to do. I needed to work with people, and I needed to work with, the reason I was good at it is because I was good at data. I could read these addresses that were all commands, and they were all these words, and you were supposed to be able to sort through the words to know what the address was, because there was no street address kind of thing, because it was military stuff. So anyway, it helps you so someone said to me, one of my kids said to me once, all my friends are so materialistic. And I said, well, like, how do you mean? And like, well, so-and-so has to have this, 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 and this. And I said, well, isn't that person pretty athletic? Yes. And I said, okay. And you're saying, what about you? And she, well, I don't want to have to own all those things. So I said, and what are you like? Well, I'm more interested in these things. And I said, right. So you're people data like your mom is, but this guy is into things. He's a things guy. He's going to be working with things. It isn't that he's materialistic. He's good at that. That's his thing that he's good at, is manipulating equipment, or, sitting and having stuff. What did we have? We had things that you played with that, almost like the fidgety things. We had stuff like that.
Yeah.
Things that you put together, like robots that you put together, or Legos would be things. Legos, right? That's a things thing.
Yeah.
And so if you pay attention to yourself, what you were like as a kid, or you pay attention to your own children, you can see things, people, data. You can. And it really helps to have that information about yourself. And then the other thing that people don't appreciate as much is whether they're introverted or extroverted. And it isn't about whether you're gregarious or not. You can be a gregarious introvert, which means you're very poised socially and you're easy access saying hi to people. What we're talking about is, how do you process information? Do you do it in an introverted way, or do you do it in an extroverted way? So the extroverts, blah, 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 blah. They'll say all kinds of stuff. They'll rattle on, and you're like, why would you say that? But they're just listening to themselves. They're processing. And the introverts have a captain on the outside and a general on the inside. And the captain's out here dealing with life and saying what they say. And then they go inside and they talk to the general, and the general goes, no way, Jose, that is not happening. And this is what you're going to do. And then the captain goes back out and does it, and doesn't necessarily report back to everybody that he changed his mind, right? So, extroverts can look like jerks or loudmouths, and introverts can look like liars, because there's two different processes going on in terms of what your brain is, how your brain is processing what you're going to do. And so how I see it as a coach is that as people move up higher and higher into responsibility, and if they don't realize they're an extroverted thinker or feeler, but they're extroverted, they of course have to stop blah, blah, blah so much because it's not discreet. The higher up you get, the less you can really share what's going on. And if you don't have somebody to talk to, you actually can't think. You actually won't. You've done it before. You know you can do it, but you won't get it done. And it looks like you're procrastinating. What it is you're not blah, blah, blahing enough because you're an extroverted thinker. I told someone the other day, I said, I don't care how you do this, get a teddy bear, but talk. You've got to talk to something or someone and hear yourself. It's about hearing yourself. And a lot of people don't know that. And so my job as a coach is to say, okay, is this person introverted or extroverted? And fortunately, we have assessments that help us with that. But if you don't have the assessment, you can tell, and you learn how to do it. And helping people to realize they're not getting stuff done. I have trouble with clutter. I have piles, right? Because I'm very, very productive, and I have piles, and I need somebody to hang out with me while I'm putting stuff away and talking about it and throwing it out. And I do really well if somebody will just sit there, and then maybe just talk to me while I'm doing it, or read a book, or maybe work on some little project. I don't need anybody to do it for me. I need somebody with me. And to know that makes you feel less crazy and less wrong, like, oh, what's wrong with me? I used to be able to do this. Maybe I'm getting old. Well, you're not getting old. You've gotten yourself isolated, and you're not blah, blah, blahing enough.
Wow. I love that, because I've always thought about the introverted versus extroverted as like what recharges your battery. That's how I've heard. That's how I've heard it. And it's not that it's not that, but I really like this way of thinking about it, like, how do you process and how do you think about things? Because I would consider myself to be an introvert, but I'm very much an extroverted thinker now that you've described it that way. And there's this whole there's this book by Gary Chapman. He talks about like two people in a couple, and one will be the babbling brook and one will be the Dead Sea. And so the babbling brooks usually get together with the Dead Seas, because the Dead Seas are just taking information. So that's me and my wife. It's like I just talk and talk and talk and talk, and that helps me process. And we call it soundboarding. You know. And so that's like, she knows that that's how I'm thinking. It's like I may be saying things that don't make sense. I may be contradicting myself here and there, but at the same time, like, this is my thinking process. Yeah. And so I think that is a very valuable thing for
and to
people
appreciate
to learn about
her style
themselves.
too. Yeah. And, to be able to, not only is she helping you, but then there's times when she's not going to blah, 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 like you would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
I have to understand
you can
that.
still love her, and she still loves you. And it's not, you're not putting the same value system on someone else that you have for yourself. So I think those are the two things, is to, people, data, things, and then the introvert, extrovert is huge in terms of understanding your potential.
So how did you switch from, I guess, human resources into coaching and starting to like work on this stuff? Because I definitely want to get more into the stuff, obviously, but I want to bridge that gap real quick. Like, how did you move from the human resources work into really like utilizing all the things that you're into? And that's where I feel like you couldn't have felt like you were fully living your purpose as a human resources person when you're not able to utilize some of that stuff. But you did say you were utilizing some of it. Like, you brought in the metaphysical stuff. You brought in the fact that, like,
quietly, though, I learned
the feet and the
grammar. I
knees.
learned in kindergarten not to tell everybody everything. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, but eventually you've come out now, and you've been like, okay, like, I'm using numerology, I'm using StrengthsFinder, I'm using Fascinate, I'm using enneagram. And so, how did you get, I guess, how did you bridge that gap? How did you lean into who you really are?
Yeah. So it was a series of events. So I went from newspapers to luxury hotels, which was unheard of at the time. If you were an HR newspaper person, you couldn't switch industries, but I did. And I went to corporate HR in boutique hotels. After that, I was recruited to be, we were getting closer to the .com era. And so recruiting was picking up. And so I was consulting, and I was helping people with transition, because I had fairly sophisticated skills. And San Diego doesn't have much in the way of headquarters or any kind of Fortune anythings unless they're subsidiaries. They're not the headquarters of stuff. So my experience as a Fortune 200 person was pretty sophisticated for where I live. So I made a great consultant, and this company that did HR consulting picked me up for 10 years and just kept me busy with all their really problematic businesses. And I learned a lot. And towards the end of that, the .com era started to happen, and they needed recruiters really badly, and they couldn't fill enough jobs with recruiters. So they came to me and they said, you know how to interview, you know how to hire, could you be a recruiter? And interestingly, I got to be a technology recruiter. So I was recruiting people in software type languages and things like that. And again, look back at what you were like as a kid. In high school, which would have been in the 60s for me, you could go to college. You were a girl, you could go to college. I took as one of my electives electronics. So I was the only girl in my electronics class. And I had to go to the school counselor and say that I wanted to take electronics. And then I had to interview with the teacher and explain why I wanted electronics, and just make sure, because this was going to be, hard on the boys, right? The boys weren't used to having females in the class. Yeah. And I had done that. And one of our assignments was to build a super heterodyne radio, which is all the tubes and soldering and all that. And so your final score was, did the radio work? And I graduated from that class, or I got out of that class with the third highest A in the class, and my radio worked. Jeez. So fast forward, and they're asking me, do you think you could do recruiting for the technology? I'm like, I think I could, because I had an interest in technology.
Nice.
And I was a very empowered woman, young woman too, because I was able to change out, plugs and fix things and understand wall. I was empowered. I knew the color code. I knew, I knew things had to be a certain way. I had soldered, So so the next thing I was after an HR consultant for the same company was one of the technical recruiters. And as I'm doing that, and as that's starting to shift, then coaching started. I was studying to be a coach on the side. And that also took about 3 years. Somebody had brought it up to me, and the coaches that I knew were basically consultants. And I thought it was kind of a cheesy occupation. And it probably was at one point, because there were no coaching schools. There wasn't, some of the formality that there is now. And people were just calling themselves coaches because that was the new buzzword. Yeah. So, it took me a while. But then I heard somebody talk one day, and he mentioned 10 things that I'm interested in. And I thought, okay, I'm going to his coaching school because he thinks like I do. He was talking about systems thinking, and he was just, his whole way of doing it was what I was like, okay, well, whatever he's doing, I want to go be with him. So that was how I started to be a coach. I started to study coaching. So the company I'm working for now I'm talking to them. I'm studying coaching. If you have any coaching clients, So one day they had somebody that said, we really need a coach for this one executive. And so the woman that I worked for, or that ran this group, she and I went and talked to the CEO and said what would happen. And I was already coaching. By the way, first client I ever had, I had an ad in a free magazine that was a tech-oriented magazine. They would drop it off everywhere. And I had an ad about being an executive coach. And one day I got a call from a woman in Seattle. And she said, I was in San Diego. I saw your ad. I want you to be my executive coach. And I said, well, tell me about why, because I hadn't had any clients yet. I was just hanging up the shingle and figuring I could figure it out. She says to me, well, I go to Coach U, which is a school, coaching school.
Yeah.
And I need to have some hours and I need a coach. And I said, but Coach U has coaches. And she says, they're all wimps. No, okay. So I never told her that she was my first client, but I said, okay, because I'm not a wimp, right? So I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So my first job as a coach was being a mentor coach to someone who's already coaching, and she was coaching people at Microsoft. Okay, so we set up our first
Jeez.
appointment. And I think we're going to talk about somebody. And this woman was very Aries energy, very, she was like exploding. She was furious when she called. And she said, I am so angry. She said, I was setting up a seminar at this venue here in Seattle. And this other woman and I were talking. And what she's done is set up a competitive venue 1 week before mine. And I feel so betrayed and I feel so this. And she's just screaming and yelling. It's not anything like what I thought was going to happen. So I'm listening. And I said, okay. And I let her talk through the whole thing. I said, okay, listen, put the phone down, go into the next room, get yourself a glass of water, stand there and drink it, and come back. And she said, will you be here when I come back? And I said, oh, yeah, but don't rush is what my point is. Just go do that. And she did it. And she came back. She goes, I feel so much better. And I said, yeah. And then we talked about what she was going to do and all that. Well, 2 years later in Vancouver, Canada, there was a ICF meeting, which is the International Coach Federation meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going and she was going. So we were going to meet each other for the first time. And what she did while I was there, they had one of the sessions was unusual techniques that coaches use. And she stood up and there was a recording of it, because they record all these sessions. And she said, my coach Timi, blah, 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 she told me, and I was like, that's amazing. That was my first appointment ever.
Jeez.
And it was that good. So, it's a series of events. So I ended up getting that gig with my boss. She said to me, you're amazing. You understand coaching. I never knew anything. I'm so glad we went together and I got to see the interaction between the CEO and you and all that. And I got the gig. And, it was just a series of events. I've got a lot of coaching credentials at this point. I started with no credentials, but I did go through that one guy B coach certification program. I went through Career Coach Institute, which was a master's in coaching. And then I went through neuro-linguistic programming coaching, health coaching, and retirement coaching. So I have, I don't do all that, but I have the perspective or the global understanding of issues, because a lot of the people I work with have all those issues. They have, maybe we're working on their strategic communication skills, but they have planning for retirement issues. They have career issues or thoughts about careers and stuff. So, I have that eclectic background.
That's crazy.
And then because I was working for this company for 10 years, one day they called and said, this company, this big company wants us to come and do a presentation at an offsite they're having. We can't do it for these reasons, but we'll set you up if you'll do it for us. And you'll probably more equipped to do it anyway. You go. So they gave me the background stuff that I needed. I went and I worked with this company on how to change their HR department's persona so that they could be more supportive to the company, be less transactional and more strategic and more, just modern, just change the way they needed to be, their culture. And they came back to me. Little did I understand that they were looking for somebody. So I ended up being recruited. I went in as a coach to 8 of 13 vice presidents, so various departments in the number 3 at the time cable company in the United States.
Jeez, that's crazy.
And a lot of this is just networking, or people being aware. Like I was always good at, if I saw something that I thought people should be aware of, I would teach it, or I would talk about it, or I would, do little speeches or something. And not much would ever come from any of that, but I had a reputation. I had a reputation as being a thought leader. Now, looking back on it, I had a reputation for being a thought leader. And there was a lot of support there that I just didn't realize. And I think that's been the other big thing about potential and evolution is, and this will tie back to the maps, is changing the way you look at yourself. In second grade, we studied all of the men that made America, the Rockefellers and the,
Carnegie, yeah.
Carnegies, all those. And I said to myself quietly, because I had learned not to share everything I'm thinking, that I would be a self-made man, that I would pull myself up by my bootstraps, because my family had so many financial problems. Both my parents drank, it was not an easy childhood. And I was like, well, there's hope, because I can be a self-made man. So by 2013, I am more than a self-made man, but I'm like, why? What do I do? What is it? What is it that makes this possible? And so I didn't exactly have imposter syndrome per se, because I knew I had done it and I knew I deserved it, because I had worked hard, and I had, during those times, women weren't treated right. There weren't the opportunities. We didn't even have credit until 1975. And I started a credit union in 1973 so that women could have credit, and not knowing that it was going to change 2 years later. And so I knew that I deserved some of this, but I didn't understand, why do people say yes? Or why do people invite me to do things? And that's where the map became important to me, because I had a guy, I was able in 2015 or so to get a 5-year contract. Might have been 2016, to get a 5-year contract with someone, with a group that got the contract with the federal government. So we had for 5 years steady clients all the time, all over the world on military bases. And we were helping them with their leadership skills. And one day, a guy said to me, I just wish I knew how my people look at me, because he had an attitude about, or a belief system about, that he was being disrespected. And he just wished he could understand, what is it he does, or what is it what is it? And I had taken this one assessment we're going to talk about, the How to Fascinate assessment, which is a branding assessment. It's not psychological, it's brand. And it tells you how people see you. Well, one of his complaints, first of all, we had been coaching for a couple months, and reoccurring themes were, he was African American. I imagine he was very preppy, because he was in a part of the United States where maybe they wear bow ties, the shirts and bow tie type thing. And he was, khakis and this, kind of preppy thing. And he talked kind of like that. And he was talking about some of the racial stuff that was happening, not just at work, but outside. So he had, he was struggling with stuff. He had a child that was disabled, and, there were some things. And so what his perception was, when he would leave at night, was that they would follow him out to his car. And his perception was, I'm off duty. You should respect me. You're disrespecting me because you're still trying to talk to me on my way to my car. Mm. Now, I wouldn't look at it that way. I would have looked at it that I'm so valuable, they wish I wouldn't leave, and they need to talk to me, and they're catching me when I'm available. But that was his way of looking at it. So I said, well, I do have this assessment, and I had never used it. You're not really supposed to use it on these contracts. You're not supposed to introduce something that isn't pre-approved, especially if it's government. Mm-hmm. But I said, I do have an assessment. I'll tell you where to go to take it. And then if you take it, I'll debrief you in your last meeting. So I waited 2 weeks, and when we got together for our last meeting, I said, so did you take it? He goes, my wife and I have not talked about anything else for the last 2 weeks. And I said, really? What happened? And he goes, well, they give you an archetype when you take this branding thing. And I said, yes. And he goes, do you know who I am? And I said, no. And he goes, I'm James Bond. And I said, you're James Bond? You are? I said, so when you're trying to leave, they're like, James, oh, James, just one more thing, right? Because you're valuable. And he goes, yeah. So what we're doing at my house is we're rethinking all of these things that I've been pissed off about for a long time and rethinking that if I'm James Bond, what else might be going on here? So that was my turning point for why I loved it already for myself because it really helped me too, the same way. But that was my turning point to start to use it more. I was still very careful because you weren't supposed to, but that's why I really like it. And then I love Strength Finders because Strength Finders is telling you what your top 5 ways are that you're going to go about stuff. And I looked at yours, and you're 3 out of 5 strategic thinking.
Yeah.
So your communication style. I'm coming on a podcast, right? I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that you're leading with strategic thinking. So you're thoughtful and analytical. You're going to probably ask me good questions. And versus if you were dominant in relationship building, you'd ask me how I feel about stuff, or was it fair? You'd ask me things like that. If your execution, high on execution, because there's 4 domains in Gallup, in the Gallup Strength Finders, you're either execution, influencing, relationship building, or strategic thinking. If you're high in execution, you'll say, and then what did you do then? And then what happened next? You'll do the bullet point type conversation. So it's helpful to me just to have and you volunteered it. I was like, oh, this is good. I can kind of see what's going on here.
Yeah, I thought you might like that. I thought you'd probably understand it better than most people, maybe even better than I understand it. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah. And so that's the other thing. And I had done that in the cable business. Was they had these assessments they were using, but they were just like palm reading, it was like fun. And then people would forget about it. And what I was doing as a coach was teaching them to go back to some of the data they had in these assessments and to ask themselves, okay, what do I need to do about this? Or why am I so upset right now? Or, to have these as like your reference books, your reference pieces, so that you can understand yourself better and also start looking at other people more effectively.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you that because, even with my experience as like a personal trainer and nutrition coach in the past, you can sometimes give people the exact roadmap or the manual for how to live, how to be better, and exactly what they're supposed to eat, exactly the workout program, and they might not do it. And so how might you give someone this tool, like the best case scenario, they do all the tests, or even best case scenario, you help them to, decode and decipher and debrief them on what these things mean for them. And so how do you kind of get over the non-action, the inaction that might come when they have all the information, but they're not necessarily putting into work?
Right. Well, that's pretty hard. I always know I've got somebody that's into action when they frame their map and they're a legend. I know then, I'll show you. I brought mine. This is what.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, this is what a map looks like.
Oh, wow.
The mountains are Strength Finders. This is the Fascination Island. These are all the roadblocks we run into. This is your numerology here, and up here is your name numerology. So it's just a representation, and then, and I suggest they put it in a white frame, but if they don't want to, other colors look good. But this is a legend that has your name, and then all of on the map, there's A through H. And so this chronicles what A through H is. And, it reminds you what your Strength Finders is. It reminds you what your Fascination was. And it tells you what the numbers mean. And so I always know that I've got somebody that's going to do it. And by having it hung up, it reminds you periodically about where you're headed. And so it's a reminder, because if we just take it and put it in a pile or put it in a drawer, you forget because you have other things to do. So it is a problem. I try, and I'm sure you did too, to say, why is this important to you, or what do you want to get out of this before, so you can kind of match it up with something, that a pain that they have, or a need that they have. But you're either ready or you're not. I mean, I think that the time I went and saw the lady the first time about the numerology, it just resonated for me. It also gave me hope, because my numbers were, especially my name, was significant. It was a significant number. And so it gave me hope that there was more coming and that I needed to be ready. And it just, I said I wanted to be an archangel. Well, that's pretty much what it was. A global humanitarian.
Yeah.
And then it took a while. It took probably 20 years before I got it, because my name. So just to talk about numerology,
Hey, go ahead.
A is 1, B is 2, C is 3. Okay. That's how it works. And there's only 9 numbers. So it goes from 1 to 9 in numerology. So once you get up to the 9th letter, which is I, you go down to start the next rows. And so there's 3 rows of 1 through 9. And so when you do someone's name, you can, do it pretty easy. And so I'm Timi Catherine Gleason, so pretty long, and it adds up to 99 points. So you add up all the numbers, and mine adds up to 99. Anytime you've got double numbers, you have a spiritual responsibility. So 9 is a humanitarian and completions. There's a couple ways you look at numbers. There's what is the person or the thing about it, but what also does it represent? So 9 is completions, 9 is humanitarianism, service above self. And when it's 99, it's global humanitarianism. 9 and 9 reduces to 18, and 1 and 8 is 9. So you have, I'm a humanitarian, I'm a global humanitarian. And what's 18? 18 is the CEO of it. And that was very curious to me for a long time. Do I, if I'm a humanitarian and I'm a global humanitarian, am I Mother Teresa? Do I go build homes down in Costa Rica? What do I do? What do I do with that? And then finally it occurred to me, what is 18? Well, 18 is a 1 and an 8. A 1 is a trailblazer and a person who acts he's the first and independently. And 8 is an influencer and a power person. So then that kind of translates into a CEO, or the person who creates the global humanitarian thing. And, with jobs I had, I didn't see it. I didn't see how that would ever work out. But you just sort of hold those things in the back of your mind. When I lost my job in cable in 2011, I said, I had to set goals, and I got a coach, and I did that. And I said, I wanted to be a global coach. And I was like, well, I don't know if I really want to travel and all that. But anyway, I want to be I want to work with people in other countries. And I do. And it just very gradually happened. One time I got asked, could you debrief 22 assessments for us, 360s, and then could you set their development plans with them? And I said yes. And these people were in Singapore, in Europe, so wow. That's another way to be global, right? And with the soul work map, I'm not sure this is the end of it. I'm not sure this is it, but it's global. I mean, it can be done in other countries as long as you've got an English name or an English interpretation of your name. It can be done. And I've experimented with it, and it works. I don't know why, if you have a Ukrainian name and you translate it, why it works, but it seems to.
Wow. So if we can use you as an example, what were some of the things that you first learned that gave you that sense of certainty to continue pursuing your path? Like even the story you just told earlier about creating a newspaper article and branding or marketing yourself as a coach, like that's to me that's a bold step. Like
Yeah,
I've thought about coaching and I have my own certifications. I've got a few certifications and
right,
my degree and whatnot, but I've never thought about just starting to, market myself as a coach before I've
right,
even gotten coaching clients. That's very interesting
right.
to me. And so did you learn the stuff about your name and the
Well, it's your
numerology
birthday.
first?
So
And
the answer to this one is it's about your birthday because your name is ultimately where you're headed. And when you're younger, it's really hard. You still got quite a bit to do. You can hold it out there, but it isn't as easy to work with as your birthday. So your birthday, and everybody can do this while they're listening. Your birthday is your month. And if you're October, November, December, it's a double number. So it's your month, and then it's your day. And again, keep it, if it's a double number, keep it double. And then it's your year. So 1990 is 1 plus 9 plus 9 plus 0. And mine added up to like 23 plus 12 plus 1. So anyway, mine's 36 points. And so now we're looking at another 9. So 3 and 6 is 9. So in the numerology that you see on the internet and that is commercial, they're reducing everything to 1 through 9. And the reason they are is because to do it otherwise is harder and confusing. And it's more commercial to just have everything be 1 through 9. So you're going to find out, oh, you're a 9. Timi, you're a 9. Yes. Okay. I'm a humanitarian working in a newspaper. What the hell? What does that mean? Right? Why am I? Well, because when I looked at my name, I'm a business humanitarian. I'm a humanitarian in business. I'm not a humanitarian out in the field or, in a community. I'm a business humanitarian. That's why having both is really helpful. But here's what's the best about it. I'm a 9. I'm 36/9. I'm a humanitarian. Fine. I'm a business humanitarian. Fine. What else? That 9 could have come from a 1 and an 8. It could have come from a 5 and a 4. It could have come from a 9 and a 0. It's what kind of 9 are you? So I'm a 36/9, a 3/6/9. So 3 is that 3's communication and creativity. And I was always really creative. And I was always fairly talkative and communicative. 6 is all about foundations. So your birthday is about your lessons. What are your lessons and what themes are they in? Mine was creativity, communication, and foundations. So I'm in this human resources job. I'm not in love with the newspaper business, but I have a chance to learn about communication because these people desperately need some communication about their benefits, about their jobs, about their lives. I'm under the gun all the time to do it tactfully, to get them to listen to me and trust me. I had major communication issues, and then they would fight. So you're a mediator. So I learned for communication, I learned community mediation, conflict resolution, strategic planning. Ultimately, later, I learned conversational intelligence, systems thinking, structural thinking, all to be an extraordinary communicator, which would put me up closer to where my destiny is headed, which is more of a global, able to handle the global pressure stuff and be sophisticated. 6 has to do with creating foundations for others. When it's your birthday, you have lessons around it. So 6s are, if you're in a 6 year, it's the year you either get a new job, you get married, or you buy a house. Something like that's happening. It might be less dramatic than that, but it's something like a foundation, something that's going to give you foundations. So when you're talking about a lesson of a 6, how do I create foundations for others? Well, I was a human resources director. I made sure you got paid. I made sure you had a pension and you knew what it was. I made sure you had a safe workplace. I made sure you had Christmas parties. So I could see at that point, before I understood all the things I understand now, I could see that I needed to be there because those opportunities were there for me to create, and that I would be developing myself as in that 6 area that I needed to develop. And so that's why when I did the map, I created 2 roads, because those would be my 3 and 6 road. And if I just do those, if I just work on my communication and creativity skills and my foundational skills, I'm headed towards where I need to go someday. I'm ready. It's about getting ready.
Yeah.
To live your full potential.
So how do people find out what these numbers mean? Is there like a resource online or something? Because I mean, if I added my birthday right now, I don't know what it means. I don't know.
Yeah. So your birthday added up to 39 points, and 3 and 9 reduces to 12, and 1 and 2 reduces to 3. So you're a 3. You're a creative communicator. Those are your challenges in your job. Any job you have is to communicate. And the 3 is coming from a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 6. So the 3 is, again, having clever, good, solid communication skills and using your creativity as you work. And then 9 is the service. It's about service to others. And as a health coach, you're definitely providing a service. Then what's interesting, though, is it reduces to 12. So the 1 is to be unique, to do it maybe your way, to have an original approach. Would that be true?
Yeah, 100%.
How so?
Because even my Myers-Briggs is like my need for authenticity is so high that I won't want to do anything unless I can do it in my own specific way.
Okay. What's your Myers-Briggs?
INTJ.
Okay. Mine's ENTJ. So, yeah. Okay. So unique and your way. And then the 2 is about balance and harmony and fairness and justice. And of course, nutrition and all that is about harmony and about balance.
Yeah, and this show is about figuring out a way to balance these big dreams with being stuck in a normal job, which is why I'm like even interested in your story of like you transitioning out of this normal job into this larger dream of being a global coach. You know, how do you make that possible? How do you get over the imposter syndrome that allowed you to, or how do you find and follow the symbols and signs that are leading you in the direction of chasing that dream?
Yes. And those are kind of your markers along the way. Those are the things to say, okay, you're on the right track. You may not completely understand it right now, but you're on the right track. Just keep doing what you're doing. We all find ourselves, until we get to a point where we're really happy with our careers. We work a lot of jobs that they were good. We're glad we got them. We wanted them, but then we realize it's not enough yet, or it's not quite what I wanted. And this is how you cope with it, by understanding you're on the right track and that this might be what you have to develop and learn right now. So how I got to the point of making the map was during the pandemic. I was working. I was still working the military contract, and they were going through a lot. We sometimes couldn't have appointments because of all they were going on with the pandemic, plus various natural disasters and things like that. They would be busy. And I was also answering questions on Quora, and a lot of the things on Quora were, they've wiped out my industry, because a lot of things were shut down. So you couldn't even, do restaurants. You couldn't do things, I've wiped out my occupation, or I'm really sick and I can't get out of bed and I'm not getting well. And my theory or my belief system is even if you're in bed with COVID or cancer, if you know your birthday, you know what your numbers are, that your themes that you need to work on, you can still do it. So if I'm in bed sick and I'm a 36, I know that I can work on my communication skills. And especially if I don't feel well or I'm angry or I'm depressed, I can work on my communication skills. And why is this happening to me? I don't know. I don't know if you're ever going to know, but you can stay the course if you know what the course is. How would I work on things foundationally if I'm in bed? Maybe write down my dreams for when I'm out of bed. Maybe look at what I can do after this is over, if it's over. But I can also, the people that are caring for me, I can also listen to them. I can help them with encouragement. I can make their jobs easy. There's a lot of things that foundationally we can do. So my theory was that if I would sit there and read these things and go, well, if I was their coach, I would recommend they do this and then have this information. And they never could afford me, right? I was like, well, but they were, they wouldn't be able to afford me. Even if I did 1/4 of my rate is, they still wouldn't afford me because they can't. They're maybe in another country or they're, they don't have any cash flow or whatever. So I thought, well, what could I do that's more mainstream that would be kind of a generic thing? And so I started to play around with because I was doing it with my clients. So the other thing that was a turning point for me is during the pandemic. Well, no, let's see. It doesn't matter that it was the pandemic. It matters that I had a 5-year contract. And by year 4 and 5, I was getting people back that I had gotten the first year. They had been promoted and now they had a coach again. And I had been elevated to be one of the advanced coaches. So I was now working with people that I had a very good bond with the first time. And they were saying to me, you blew my socks off before with Strength Finders. What have you got? Well, I didn't have anything. But I did. I had fascination. So I said, well, if you're willing to go online and pay for it yourself and do that, we can take this other thing. I'll combine it with Strength Finders and we'll take a look at what else and I told them the story about the guy that said, I wish I knew how my people looked at me. Well, they all want that, right? They all are on these military bases. They're dying to know how everybody looks at them. Yeah. So I started doing that. And then, you just do that just routinely. And after a while you start seeing connections. And then a couple of people were having some really complex problems. I did their numbers for them. I mean, I could have lost my job, but I did their numbers for them. And, it was life-changing for them. So I started to see the connections. And then when I pulled it together at the 3 things, the numerology, Strength Finders, and the How to Fascinate assessment. So if you were looking for it online, it's howtofascinate.com. Okay. And you want the, I'm trying to think if it's $69 or $79. I think it's $69 one. You don't want the $100 one or the $19 one. You want the $69 one. And I just started to see they were synergistic, that they actually played off of each other. And then I got to thinking, what if it really was a map? What would the map look like? So I had an assistant. I had her go find the right kind of artist. We used naive art, almost like a child's drawing. And I said, let's get a map. And we don't know what we want. So we had to find somebody who was willing to work with us when we didn't know what we wanted. But I had a kind of a checklist. It has to have mountains, has to have an island, and then it has the sea. What have I got here? The sea of uncertainty, the Ferris wheel of multiple perspectives, the roller coaster of change. I had all these things, right? Because in the middle of these roads are all these things that are happening to us every day that's throwing us off the path. Just like the Wizard of Oz, the flying monkeys and the straw man and the tin man, all this stuff is throwing you off path. So Anyway, eventually these women that worked with me were so brilliant. They said, well, do you have a sense of what that might look like? And of course I did. So I would draw it, and then they go, well, do you know whether you want this or this? And I would pick, and they basically just kept asking me questions until we had it, so it was
Wow.
good. Yeah, it was really good. And then, you have to work on color and stuff like that to have it be pleasant. But that's how it came to be. And I also went, I went and looked at the game of life and Chutes and Ladders and, some of the things that are paths, how do paths get done, and just thought about it like that. And I think someday it could be a game board, but I would need a collaborator on that one to talk to me about it.
That would be a really cool idea.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Man, my son would love that. Like he wants to know all about himself and he wants to know about all of our ancestors and stuff. He's 9
Oh yeah.
and
Well,
into
you can do
learning.
your son's. You can do your son's numerology. So yeah, there's books you can buy that would have the double numbers and be at the quality that we're talking about. But I mean, a lot of stuff. Let's see. Yeah, you can go online and say what would this number mean? You can probably get it at this point with AI and all that.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking that if anybody does want to talk to me, they can go on my website, soulworkmaps.com, and communicate with me, and I could send you, a one pager on what the numbers are.
Okay, nice. Nice.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's awesome. That'd be very
Yeah.
nice. I was going to ask if you had any other stories of people using it, whether they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I know that's like more along the lines of the people that you're working with that have used it and then have, gotten great results, like the James Bond guy, that have been like had
That would
some
be the How to
clarity.
Fascinate assessment that made a big
Yeah.
difference for him. I could tell you about with me for How to Fascinate that, again, I didn't really see myself as having imposter syndrome, but what I did have was a kind of an ache inside about, I wish I knew what it is I do that people say yes to me. Why did the state of California say yes? Why did I get to go from being a state employee to being a director of human resources? Because I'd always said, I never want to be a supervisor. I don't want to be the bologna between the two pieces of bread. I had this thing, in my head about it. And to be able to pull that off, to go from being a state employee to being a director of human resources in Fortune 200 with that high visibility, 24 companies throughout the world that I was part of. And it was kind of like, how does that happen? Or how is it that cable company, went and did that and then made that kind of offer they made? And why was that guy afraid of me? Because he was afraid of me. That's why he wasn't being more direct with me. He was like afraid I was going to say no. He really wanted me to say yes. So I had a lot of curiosity of, well, if I knew what it was, I could do it on purpose. I could bottle it or something. I don't know. I just wanted to know. So when I took in fascination, this is probably worth talking about with everybody too. The theory of it is in branding that there are triggers that cause a customer to want what they want. So if you think about cars, there are compact cars, family cars, luxury cars, trucks, SUVs, different types of cars, and there's a trigger. There's something that you want that causes you to want a truck to drive to work when you work in an office. There's a trigger there that's causing that. And the same thing with hotels. Got all these different kinds of hotels. Some people just want a place to sleep. Some people want to go take their families. Some people want it to be an experience. It's a trigger. So the woman that was doing this was an award-winning copywriter and brander. And she had an aha moment that there are triggers that we have as human beings that cause people to want to hire us or to be with us. And the triggers are passion, prestige, mystique, alertness, which is a sense of details, trust, which is repetition, kind of always can do it the same way kind of thing. There's 7 of them. So interestingly, and this task that she has takes 10 minutes to take, where Strength Finders is a 30-minute or 25-minute or 20-minute commitment at the least, right? You have to there's an algorithm, and you have to work against this algorithm to get it narrowed down. There's 34 strengths you have. Well, this thing that she does with fascination takes 10 minutes. She used to have 150 questions. She has 28 questions now because she's got it down. And it tells you what your two biggest advantages are as a human being. What is it that people see? Not what do you want it to be, which is really, when I was taking this, branding was big in 2012, 11, 13, really a big topic, because you were going to create your brand. Well, guess what? You have a brand. And wouldn't it be great if you knew what people see? And how this works with the map is that we have your destiny. We know what you have to work on. We know what your 5 strengths are. But what do people see? Is it aligned with what you're supposed to do? Or is it different? And how would it be different? And if it's aligned, it really helps. So remember that my name adds up to 99 points. I'm a global humanitarian who's possibly the CEO of whatever it is I'm working on. My 2 triggers, my 2 advantages are prestige and power. So even as a kid, I was prestige, power, and I was thinking archangel. Mm-hmm. I could be an archangel. I mean, I knew I wasn't perfect, and I knew that that humans aren't angels, but why couldn't I do that job, which would be very prestigious because it's at the archangel level, and also, be that influencer. So there, even as a child, you can see it in me. So anyway, I finally in 2013 found out that I was prestige first, power second, and then passion. So passion's your ability to work with people. Power is your ability to influence. And I was very influential, right? Writing notes to the state of California, making stuff happen. Yeah. And then prestige is doing things the right way. And when you're high on prestige, others look to you and go, she looks like she knows what she's doing. Let's go be with her. Mm-hmm. Or she's actually telling the truth. Let's stop doing what we're doing and try to do it the way she's talking about it. I will sometimes say to people, I get it that you are going to cheat on that, but that's fine. But I don't want to join you, and then we're like, oh, well, she's doing it okay by doing it honest. Maybe I would do it that way too. They don't have enough role models for it. So prestige is very influential that way. And then when you see me Fortune 200, and then I went into luxury hotels from newspapers to that's a big switch, especially when you're not supposed to be able to do it. I went into like boutique hotels from newspapers.
Yeah.
So there's your prestige, somehow I'm putting off this convincing vibe. So the impact it had on me was I now understood some of the invitations I get. I quit looking at it when men would ask me to do stuff, and I saw it as, oh, they want a woman who's their lackey, or there's some ulterior motive here because they're lazy or whatever. I started looking at, no, they're not lazy. They don't know how to do it, and they needed me. And it helped me. It helped my heart a lot, and it made more sense. It made sense that I could go from being a state employee, that I was competing against people that were human resource directors with Allstate and, other companies in the area. They were all experienced, and I got the job. It was weird, right? Yeah. But I had a vibe, and would think about it. 2 weeks away from an election, how was I going to turn it? Because I had credibility, natural credibility. But that was bothering me, to be honest. It was bothering me until 2013. I didn't get it.
Jeez. See, that's so cool. And I think that branding is still a really big thing right now Which is part of the reason that I wanted to have you on too, because there's this whole thing of the creator economy. I don't know if you've heard of that term, but solo entrepreneurs and people that are
Yep.
building YouTube channels and building
Yep.
up, making themselves into thought leaders or
Right. They're
influencers
using their
or
creativity. There's some very creative things going on.
yeah, and people
Yes.
are able to do it all the way. We use this example a lot in the industry of like the knitting. There's like a lady who created a whole channel around her knitting, and like you can brand yourself in any sort of way. But I think it's really valuable to know, what are your strengths, how people see you. So the fascinate is how people see you. The strengths is the strengths
Is
finder.
how you're going to operate, right? What are you going to put out and how are you going to put it out? I worked with a group in a bank one time and I was talking about the execution thing and they all pointed to this one guy. And the boss said he never finishes his sentences because he's talking in bullets. He's talking in bullets and he has this way of talking. And they were all laughing. They're going, yeah, you are totally execution because he was dominant in the execution style. So it's just really valuable to understand when, especially if you're asked to do something you haven't done before or you haven't done very much, it's very, very valuable to understand why it's going to work. If you just be yourself, it'll just work because that's what you're about.
That's a good point then. So what do you think prevents people from being themselves? A hard
Comparison.
question.
Well,
Yes.
comparisons, right? And not understanding who they are. So that's why I brought up the people data things, introvert, extrovert, and then, having a better idea what your brand is. You want to, in my mind, you want to align all this. You want it to all make sense. Because when it makes sense, it's truthful, it's congruent, it resonates for people. You're the real. I mean, I had my face read. You can go online. You can Timi Gleason face reading and find it. This woman never met me. I paid her to do this, but she looked at my picture and she read my face. And one of the things she said was, Timi is the real deal. And I thought, my God, I didn't pay her enough to say that, but she had, I have a kind of a certain shape and I have eyebrows that are a certain way and all that. And she said, and I have enough information. I know what she does for a living and I know this and that about her from her LinkedIn. And this all is congruent. And that's what you want. You want to resonate with others in the area where you need to resonate. We're not all built to resonate the same way. Not everybody needs to be a global humanitarian. And you, by the way, are very interesting. You gave me your names and you are, born under two master numbers. And it's interesting. You came in your past life. It looks like you were a spiritual light messenger. You had a message and you exercised it, you learned it and you gave it. And you came in with this experience of having had a message previously. And then the way that you, under your birth name, the way that you were presenting was a master builder. You would have came in just with some very powerful vibrations. And very original. No matter whether you used your birth name or another name, you're original, reoccurring theme, original, going to do it your way.
That's powerful.
So helpful, very, very helpful. Also helpful, some of the numbers are karmic. And so when you do a name, A is 1, B is 2. Well, you break the name out. So you have vowels on the top. You have the numbers for the vowels on the top and the numbers for the consonants along the bottom. And when you add up the vowels, that says what your last experience is. What are the skill sets you're coming in with? And that's really helpful too, to know that you're coming in with skill sets. You've done whatever it is you have to do now before, or you've done something that will help you do it now. So that's useful. And then the lower numbers are the way that people will experience you. And together they make your destiny.
Dang.
Okay. And so, having a general idea of a destiny. So your general idea of your destiny is unconventional, very responsible, and that your energy is really original and kind of freedom from confinement oriented and magnetic, that what you do, you will magnetize, that people will pay attention to you. So now, I don't know what your dreams are, for the future, but if we were coaching, I would ask you, probably before I would tell you this, I would ask you, what are, like in 10 years or 20 years, or if you were to retire, what are some of your dreams? And we would develop that. And then we would go back and take a look. Okay, how does that resonate with what I'm seeing?
Dang, that's such a good one. Like, I love the idea of teaching people to get to know themselves better and how empowering that can
Well,
be. And we were talking
yes.
about comparing yourself, because it's like,
Mhm.
when I learned my strengths, I literally, not only did I gain empathy for other people as well, because when I learned my strengths, it was like researcher and analytical and all these things. And I was like wondering, I thought that other people
Am I
just
in the
struggled
wrong
to see.
job?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so other people
Mhm.
struggle to see things the way that I do. And like, maybe it's like on one end, it was like, am I better than other people? But I don't like to believe that,
No, probably a
and
thought
it's like,
leader. Probably a
yeah, and
thought
it
leader.
was, and so it was like something like that, like understanding like not everyone is interested in researching things, not everyone interested in reading books and analyzing things,
Right.
but I am, so I can be the person who does that for people.
And they will
I can be
follow
the one who
you.
reads the books, yeah, that reads the
Yes.
books and talks to people about it,
Yes.
you
I
know?
remember a couple years ago, I was talking to a coworker. So a couple years, it'd be at least 10 or 12 years ago, when there was an election. And we were talking about, various issues and stuff. And I said, well, this is what I would do, and this is how I would handle it. And if this happened and that, she says, I don't care about any of that. I'll be with you. Just you figure it out. I'll be at your doorstep with my bags ready to go. So I thought that was interesting. And that was before I found out my archetypes. So I was, again, like, why would anybody follow me? I don't
Yeah,
have answers, I don't know, but I have opinions and I have plans, right? So that's why they would follow me. And also because I'm trustworthy.
yeah, yeah. The prestige is like, you're definitely
Yeah.
doing things right, and we can see
Yeah.
that.
People can feel it. And even if you're not perfect, they'd rather be with you than on their own.
Yeah,
There's followers, there's leaders, there's people in between that make things comfortable. There's number twos and number ones. There's all these different roles that we play, and it's really nice to have a sense. I'm supposed to be a CEO, but I don't know. I don't know if I see myself as number one. I see myself as a person that makes things happen. I don't know if I'm really number one, because number one is having to deal with a lot of pressure, but I don't know. I'm the president of my homeowners association right now. I'm definitely number one. So I don't
oh
know.
my gosh,
Yeah.
that's funny.
Yeah.
So okay. So if people are at home, we're gonna kind of wrap it up here. If people are at home and they're watching this podcast, or they're in their car or whatever, or listening to it, and they like feel like what they're doing is not necessarily them. They feel like they have some skills, and these are the people that I really resonate with. That like feel like they have a huge potential, and they're
Right.
just not quite there. They're just not
Right.
like, I'm in the wrong job. Maybe I'm going
Yeah.
towards the wrong thing. Maybe I'm just picking a job because I heard it was a good job, or maybe I'm comparing myself to somebody else, or maybe I'm following someone else's path. How might you suggest that they would start taking their own path and start down this road of self-discovery? And obviously some of these tools, you're free to mention those again, so we can kind of get the bullet points, if you will, the execution
Mm-hmm.
down of how you might take someone down the road of getting to know themselves better and taking their own path.
Yeah. So there's a couple things. The two assessments we're talking about, the first one is at Gallup, GALLUP.com. And it's Strength Finders, Clifton Strength Finders. And it's, I believe, $59 right now. And you can take that and they'll give you several reports. It's all self-explanatory. But if you're an extroverted thinker, you probably need to talk to somebody. So you might consider me and look me up either on LinkedIn, Timi Gleason, or Coach Timi Gleason. And then you could also go to soulworkmaps.com. You could also go to Executive Goals, goals with an S, GOALS.com. And just say that I heard you on Todd's show, and I would, really discount my time to talk to you and make it happen. Maybe go over your report with you. And if you do both reports, the Strength Finders and the Fascination, and you find that at howtofascinate.com. And remember, it's the middle range one. I believe it's 69. They keep changing the prices, so I think it's 69. Get that done and do the same thing. Talk to me. I'll put a map together for $25 for you if you want. I mean, eventually these things are going to be hundreds of dollars, but I'm still building my data, and I'm still working on, how I want to approach it. And it's a new concept. It's very weird for somebody to take 3 different products and combine them to make a 4th product. And one of the problematic problems for me is that those 2 assessments keep changing their prices. So it makes my thing really tricky, so I haven't really settled on charging people very much for it yet. But I'm building my cadre of maps done. So I'd be interested in anybody who wants to take those 2 assessments and give me the data and then pay for a little bit of my time to talk it over with you. I would consider it marketing time. So it would be, like under $50 to talk to me. And we could do that, or you can just get the 2 reports. Both reports are very self-explanatory. The problem with the Fascination one is the way it's written, you think you know what she's saying. So this woman that designed it is a very interesting person to listen to. And there are videos attached to the report online that you can listen to her. But when she says you run into a bad situation and solve it, people will say, yeah, I solve bad situations all the time. And what she's really saying is you run into it. You run towards those things. You are attracted to that stuff, and you are invaluable because of that. Mm. So her sentences, if you're reading it as kind of in a dismissive way or a certain way, makes sense. And you go, yeah, I've seen that. I know that. But what she's saying is, no, you're fascinating because you go towards that stuff. You want that stuff. You fix that stuff all the time. And when you're looking for a person who fixes things and you see that in them, you want them, and you want them to interview that way or sell that way. You want them to know who they are and sell it. Mm. And so it can be helpful to have somebody to talk to about it. But the reports are both great. And then numerology, there's books. There's a book called Numerology, Spiritual Light Vibrations by Jean Morris. This one is sort of a metaphysical double number approach to numerology. And then there's a classic one that doesn't deal with really high numbers, but this one's also a go-to. It's Numerology Divine Triangle, and it's Dusty Bunker and Faith Javen. Okay. So those are 2 where they actually talk about your numbers in a double sense, if you're interested in numerology.
See, that's so cool. I love the idea of just taking self-awareness to a whole new level. People talk about mindfulness and self-awareness or metacognition, and all that stuff is super valuable. But I think that this is really awesome as well. Like getting to know your personality, getting to know your strengths, getting to know your destiny,
your potential, right? Your potential.
Yeah.
This is what and the evolution of your potential. And I think, with all that we're facing with the country being divided and what could possibly happen, it's going to be really important for us to know more about ourselves and to find some peace and some foundations there within ourselves until we get through it, because we will get through it.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing too, is like getting over the imposter syndrome, getting over the comparison, and really leaning into who you are and having that confidence in your own authenticity is a big part of this. And this is something that this is why I was so interested in interviewing you as well, is because I actually, at one point when I was getting into like moving from fitness coaching, nutrition coaching into like more like mindset coaching, I knew that people, if they knew themselves a little bit better, would be a little bit happier, would be a little bit
Yeah.
more confident, and confidence is
Yeah.
huge in
And
moving
calmer, less
forward in life.
stressed. You want to be less
Yeah.
stressed, right? Because a
Yeah,
lot
which
of
also
stuff's very
helps people
stressful.
lose weight and everything. It's crazy the
Yeah.
things that getting rid of stress can do. And so I studied something called Ayurveda and Ayurvedic, and so like they have you doshas, and so I think the dosha test is really good as well. And so I'm just going to throw
Mm.
that in there as well. It's like they give you like a pitta or vata or kapha, and those are like lean into what personality you are, how you digest food. It basically is based around the elements that you're made up of.
That's a
And
good
it's just
point.
something that they believe. And so everyone kind of has their own little way of doing it. There's a book called the I Ching as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge in China apparently, and they use numerology, astrology, philosophy, and bring everything together. And like the Tao Te Ching is based around this
Right.
book, and so there's just a lot of validity here
I do
in
want to
doing.
say that numerology can be Indian numerology, East Indian, or it can be Chinese. And the numerology we've been talking about is Pythagoras. And Pythagoras lived
Mm,
500 years before Christ, and he was a Greek philosopher and considered a human god. And he was so bright. He could explain all of the universe via numbers. And he's the guy that did the Pythagorean theorem
yeah,
that we
Pythagorean
learned.
theorem. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm huge. I'm huge into studying all those guys.
Mhm.
Said he could hear the sound of the spheres.
Mhm.
He could hear the planets.
Yep.
They said he had a golden thigh. There were so many myths about him, but he just is such an amazing guy. Like
Mhm.
so, that's
So
actually really cool. So, like I
yeah,
said,
what
just
we're doing
the
is very, very simple. It's very, it's very pragmatic and kind of modern, but it's coming from some really cool stuff.
yeah. And so I just want to convince people to be open-minded about any of this stuff and all of this stuff, whether you do one test, whether you do two, three, four, five different things, whether you bring all three of those things together into a soul map, like getting to know yourself better, leaning into who you are, overcoming the imposter syndrome, overcoming the comparison,
Right.
finding your authentic self is just super, super valuable, especially today in this world where there's more opportunity to create a brand around yourself. We already, like you said, you already do have a brand. You don't even need to
Yes.
create it. You already are a brand,
I was in
you
a
know?
branding class once, and this guy said, "Well, I don't do brands." He says, "I just fly below the radar." And she said, "That's your brand."
Nice. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Exactly. I
Mhm.
love that. I love that. So it's been amazing
Oh,
interviewing
same.
you.
Thank you. Thanks for the good
Thank you.
questions
Oh,
and the good
absolutely. No, thanks for
conversation.
coming on. Your story was awesome. I'm really happy that we were able to ground it in all the human resources stuff that you went through, all the almost serendipitous promotions that you got and stuff, but
Yeah.
then coming back full circle to explaining why that might have happened, with the prestige and the power, and I love
Passion.
that you shared that. And I love that awareness that you have of your story and why that might have happened and the pursuit that you've been on to understand. And I wish that everyone would take a piece of that from you and
Thank
really
you.
work towards understanding themselves better as well.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for coming on, and
You're welcome.
potentially I might have to see where your journey takes you and see
Yeah.
if we
Let's
can
stay in
build the
touch.
soul work.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, and I want to see where the soul work takes you, and I want to see if you can build it into a video game, or not maybe not a video game, but a board game.
A board game. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
where you can get to know
Well, if you
yourself
take
better, almost like.
Strength Finders, I have everything I need to put your map together. So
Okay,
not
yeah,
Strength Finders if you take
the
Fascination.
fascinate, yeah,
Mhm.
okay,
Send
I
me
would
your
love that.
scores. Mhm.
I would love that. Okay,
All right.
yeah. All right, thank you so much, Tammy.